Who was Alexander the Great? The vast Eurasian Empire, that Alexander the Great, 356 to 323 BC, forged was not long-lasting, but his heroic deeds were legendary. Alexander was the son of King Philip II of Macedonia, a realm north of Greece. When Athens was left unstable by the interminable Peloponnesian War, Philip saw an opening and took it. He subdued Greece around 339 BC. While Philip was at war, Alexander studied math, archery, and other subjects with tutors, including the renowned philosopher Aristotle. According to Greek author Plutarch, Alexander kept a copy of Homer's Iliad, annotated by Aristotle, with his dagger under his pillow, declaring that he esteemed it a perfect portable treasure of all military virtue and knowledge. The precocious Alexander was already a seasoned commander in the Macedonian army, when he became king at the age of 20 in 336 BC, after his father's assassination. In one of his most decisive moves, the young monarch forcefully proved his authority over rebellious Greeks by storming the defiant city of Thebes, slaughtering thousands of residents and enslaving the rest. Conquering the Persian Empire. While Alexander may have had his own reasons for expanding eastward, his official reason for wanting to conquer the Achaemenid Persian Empire was to lead the allied Greeks in a war of liberation, to free forever from Persian control. The Greek cities along the Anatolian coast and on the island of Cyprus, and in so doing also to exact revenge for the Persians' invasion of Greece under great King Xerxes in 480 to 479 BCE. But ironically, Alexander often fought Greek mercenaries, while campaigning against Darius III, the king of Persia. Even more ironically, Sparta, a city that had famously lost its king, and 300 warriors in the Battle of Thermopylae during a Persian invasion attempt, also opposed Alexander, going so far as to seek Persian help in the Spartans' efforts to overthrow him, according to Siculus. Nevertheless, Alexander was hugely successful against Persia. The first major battle he won against the Parisans was in 334 BC at the Battle of Granicus, fought in modern-day western Turkey, not far from the ancient city of Troy. The ancient Greek historian Arrian wrote that Alexander defeated a force of 20,000 Persian horsemen, and an equal number of foot soldiers. He then advanced down the coast of West Turkey, taking cities and depriving the Persian navy of bases. The second key battle he won, and perhaps the most important, was the Battle of Issus, fought in 333 BC near the ancient town of Issus in southern Turkey, close to modern-day Syria. In that battle, the Persians were led by Darius III himself. Arrian estimated that Darius had a force of 600,000 troops, probably wildly exaggerated, and initially positioned himself on a great plain, where he could mass his force effectively against Alexander, who hesitated to give battle. Darius is said to have thought this as a sign of timidity. One courtier after another incited Darius, declaring that he would trample down the Macedonian army with his cavalry. So, Darius gave up his position, and chased Alexander. At first this went well, and Darius's soldiers got in the rear of Alexander's force. However, Darius's army had been led to a narrow spot, where the Persians could not use their superior numbers effectively, and at that point Alexander moved his force against the Persians. Alexander's experienced army proved too strong for the Persian force, and eventually Darius fled, along with his army. In his haste, Darius left much of his family behind, including his mother, wife, infant son and 2 daughters. Alexander ordered that they be honored, and addressed as royalty. After the battle, Darius offered Alexander a ransom for his family and alliance, through marriage. Arrian wrote that Alexander rebuked Darius in writing, saying, "In the future whenever you send word to me, address yourself to me as king of Asia and not as an equal, and let me know, as the master of all that belong to you, if you have need of anything." Pharaoh of Egypt. Alexander then moved south along the eastern Mediterranean, continuing a strategy designed to deprive the Persians of their naval bases. Many cities surrendered, but some, such as Tyre, which was on an island in modern-day Lebanon, put up a fight and forced Alexander to lay siege. In 332 BC, after Gaza was taken by siege, Alexander entered Egypt, a country that had experienced on and off periods of Persian rule for 2 centuries. On its northern coast, he founded Alexandria, the most successful city he ever built. Alexander claimed the title of pharaoh, and according to cartilage, looked to attach himself to the line of Egyptian rulers, through a traditional ceremony. Almost certainly he had himself crowned pharaoh in the old Egyptian capital of Memphis, thereby not only ingratiating himself with the Egyptian masses, but also enfolding the old and still powerful Egyptian priesthood in the embrace of his new Egyptian monarchy. Battle of Gaugamela. With the eastern Mediterranean and Egypt under his control, Alexander successfully deprived the Persians of naval bases, and was free to move inland to conquer the eastern half of the Persian Empire. At the Battle of Gaugamela, fought in 331 BC in northern Iraq near present-day Erbil, Alexander faced as many as 1 million troops, according to Arrian. Modern scholars' estimates vary, but put the total closer to 100,000 against roughly 50,000 soldiers for Alexander. Darius brought soldiers from all over his empire, and even beyond. Scythian horsemen from the Persian Empire's northern borders faced Alexander. The battle soon became a war of nerves. For a brief period the fighting was hand-to-hand, but when Alexander and his horsemen pressed the enemy hard, shoving the Persians and striking their faces with spears, and the Macedonian phalanx, tightly arrayed and bristling with pikes, was already upon them. Darius, who had long been in a state of dread, now saw terrors all around him. He wheeled about, the first to do so, and fled. From that point on the Persian army started to collapse and the Persian king fled, with Alexander in hot pursuit. Darius was later betrayed by one of his satraps, or regional governors, named Bessus, who then claimed kingship over what was left of Persia, and was killed by his own troops in 330 BC. Alexander wanted a peaceful transition of power in Persia following Darius's defeat. He needed to have the appearance of legitimacy to appease the people, so Alexander provided a noble burial for Darius. Providing noble burials was a common practice by Alexander and his generals when they took over the rule of different areas of the empire. Alexander was influenced by the teachings of his tutor, Aristotle, whose philosophy of Greek ethos did not require forcing Greek culture on the colonized. Alexander would take away the political autonomy of those he conquered, but not their culture or way of life. In this way, he would gain their loyalty by honoring their culture, even after the conquest was complete, creating security and stability. Alexander himself even adopted Persian dress, and certain Persian customs. Wishing to incorporate the most easterly portions of the Persian Empire into his own, Alexander campaigned in Central Asia from 330 and 327 BC. It was a rocky, frost-bitten conflict that raised tensions within his army, and led to Alexander killing two of his closest friends. Why did Alexander kill his friends? Alexander killing Parmenio, his former second-in-command, and Clitus, the Macedonian king's close friend, who is said to have saved his life at the Battle of Granicus, may be seen as a sign of how Alexander's men were becoming tired of campaigning, and how Alexander was becoming increasingly paranoid. At some point during Alexander's campaign in Central Asia, Parmenio's son, Philotas, allegedly failed to report a plot against Alexander's life. The king, incensed, decided to kill not only Philotas, and the other men deemed conspirators, but also Parmenio, even though he apparently had nothing to do with the alleged plot. Alexander tasked a man named Polydamas, a friend of Parmenio, to perform the deed, holding his brothers hostage until he murdered Parmenio. Arriving in Parmenio's tent in the city where he was stationed, Polydamas handed him two letters, one from Alexander and one from Parmenio's son. When Parmenio was reading the letter from his son, a general named Cleander, who aided Polydamas with his mission, opened him, Parmenio, up with a sword thrust to his side, then struck him a second blow in the throat, killing him. A second casualty of Alexander's fury was his friend Clitus, who was angry at Alexander for adopting Persian dress and customs. After an episode where the two were drinking, Clitus scolded the king, telling him, in essence, that he should follow Macedonian ways, not Persian customs. Clitus lifted up his right hand and said, "This is the hand, Alexander, that saved you then, at the Battle of Granicus." Alexander, infuriated, killed him with a spear or pike. Alexander took his act of murder terribly. Again and again, he called himself his friend's murderer and went without food and drink for 3 days and completely neglected his person. Alexander's